crowd here is still excited, listening to speakers, still animated, and still adamant that any cuts are too much, especially when it comes to education. For District Wire News in Annapolis, I'm Karina Stenquist. Senator John McCain, meanwhile, has spoken of waiting until the regularly scheduled elections in September. But from what people have told us here today, for the people of Egypt, that may be asking too much. The Facebook changes only apply in the US, UK, Australia, Canada, and France. In countries like Spain, which legalized gay marriage in 2006, the options remain the same, ranging from it's complicated to widowed to just plain married. Carnival, that time of year before the stark days of Lent when people trade frugality for excess. And while in many parts of the world, Catholics preparing for repentance mark their forehead with ashes to remind us of the dust to which we shall return, here in Madrid they do it differently. They bury a sardine. I don't know, they bury a sardine. Things are just warming up here at the second weekend of the 5th annual Mundialito de la Inmigración y la Solidaridad, or for the non-Spanish speaking, the Immigration and Solidarity World Cup, diminutive, Mundialito, get it? A tournament of 28 teams of the foreign-born to compete to be the best immigrant team in Madrid. ¿Cómo se forman los equipos? ¿Cómo son grupos de amigos que se conocen aquí, que deciden entrar y formar un equipo? ¿Cómo se hace?
Bueno, inicialmente son todos inmigrantes que residen en Madrid.
Good afternoon and welcome to District Wire News. I'm Karina Stenquist. The Federal Aviation Administration is suspending another air traffic controller and a manager. The FAA says the Cleveland controller was watching a DVD while working, and his microphone was accidentally transmitting the movie soundtrack for more than 3 minutes. It happened on the same day the FAA released stricter rules and regulations for air traffic controllers. The suspension comes after 8 instances this year when controllers were sleeping on the job or didn't respond while on duty.
Bienvenidos a las noticias del distrito. Yo soy Yesenia Alfaro.
Y yo soy Karina Stenquist. Gracias por acompañarnos. Metro ha cumplido 35 años el mes pasado, pero su futuro en el distrito es incierto. Hay tantas reparaciones y mantenimientos necesarios hoy que el ex administrador del metro dice que el sistema está destinado a fracasar si no dedican más recursos para mejorarlo. Los administradores del metro dicen que se están concentrando en las reparaciones de los trenes y construcción de las nuevas líneas y estaciones. Pero esto va a costar mucho. Anticipan gastos de $5.000 millones en los próximos 6 años. Pero esto no será suficiente para cubrir todas las obras.
Raise your voice!
Protesters in Washington begin their second day showing support for the uprising in Cairo. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak has traditionally been a U.S. ally, and President Obama has not called for him to step down. Some say his words so far have been enough.
Democracy is going to come from Egyptian or the democracy from Tunisia, definitely. But for the first time, probably the United States government is supporting the people. That's what I believe.
Many others want something more concrete.
Obama, Obama, yes we can!
We are waiting for the US to push and take actions against this regime and then convince this regime to step down. That's why we are waiting. Actions, not just words.
Egyptian American families say they're using their democratic rights here, asking the U.S. to push for those same rights in Egypt.
We're here to show the world that one American is a beacon of freedom and also send the message that we don't want our government supporting dictators.
People are anxious for the U.S. to play a positive role.
We want the American people to stand by the right side of history. We can't miss it.
The United States should not wait until there will be anti-American feelings among the Egyptian people.
While people debate Despite the White House response, protesters have actually garnered support from both sides of the aisle in Congress. Republican Ileana Ros-Lehtinen of Florida has made statements calling for a change in government, and Democrat Dennis Kucinich of Ohio has called for democracy and freedom for the people of Egypt. Senator John McCain, meanwhile, has spoken of waiting until the regularly scheduled elections in September, but from what people have told us here today, for the people of Egypt, that may be asking too much. In Washington, D.C., I'm Karina Stenquist.
And it goes on and on and on and on. Wake the flip up, 'cause it's been too long.
At the True Reformer building on U Street, budding spoken word artists gathered for the D.C. Youth Slam Poetry Finals.
We living in a world filled with unfortunate oppression, and no matter how many years go by, things like nothing is progressing.
Competition is really stiff.
And there were no witnesses.
10 poets ranging in age from 14 to 19 faced a panel of audience member judges. One would come out as champion, and the top 5 would constitute the D.C. Youth Slam Poetry team.
Oh, I'm nervous now, my stomach. The walk up to the steps, look in the mic, and then I go, and I'm good.
And go they did, on topics ranging from that high school crush
Junior year English class, you sat right behind me, and I wore tight jeans so that you were like the behind of me.
to global conflict,
Young boys were Taliban soldiers, and that drug flows in this land of milk and honey. There is a war here.
or inner conflict.
You can't love the skin that you're in if you don't soul search for something greater.
But the top spot could only go to one.
And our Grand Slam champ tonight with a total of 58.2. Put your hands together for Janahi.
19-year-old Janahi wowed the audience with her poem about female circumcision. She said it was dedicated to her grandmother, who went through the ordeal.
Why you look like somebody ran through her with a razor blade, the way children run through drawing books before they ever learn how to color inside the lines. Baby girl, this is tradition.
The Slam team will go to San Francisco in July to compete in the Brave New Voices competition. The Slam, now in its 14th year, comprises over 500 young poets from around the country and the world. While the competitions are fun, most poets say that the process is an end in itself.
It's a safe haven for me. It's a comfort zone.
Every single time I step on the stage, it's telling everybody, this is my story, this is what I want to see happen in my community.
I'm not really the football player, like jockey guy. I'm like one of those cool little nerds, and it gives me like a voice, I guess.
A fundraiser for the trip to Nationals will be held May 4th at 7 p.m. at George Washington University.
I'll be that girl in your sights lane, trying to maintain so you and me can be again. Sincerely, Rachel.
From Washington, D.C., I'm Karina Stenquist.
Karina Stenquist joins us with a look at the political concerns of one growing segment of the D.C. population. Karina, thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Everyone's talking about the growth of the Latino population reflected in last year's census. I recently visited one young man who, for many, represents what some are seeing as the start of a new era for DC's Latinos. Now, joining me in the studio is Linda Mancias from American University's School of Public Affairs, who teaches government as well as Latino and gender studies. Thank you so much for coming out today.
Thank you for having me.
You brought up education, and that was definitely the sort of #1 topic discussed at this forum on Saturday. But people seem to speak of it in sort of general terms, knowing it's important, right? More funding for this, more funding for bilingual education, more bilingual educators. But on a local level, like, what's a concrete thing that someone like a DC City Council member could do to further educational needs for the Latino community? Latino growth is one of the biggest stories coming out of the census. Right. One of the stats that gets thrown around is people are saying that if it follows this trend in 2050, 1/3 of the nation will be Latino. And what I'm wondering is this possible fuel for a backlash for people who have like an anti-immigrant, anti-Latino agenda to fuel sort of, they often use rhetoric of invasion?
Certainly it can be.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
All right, back to you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Karina.